What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Closing the Deal. I am your host, Sam Enright, and sitting across from me is my co-host, Zach Dixon. Zach, what is going on today, man?
Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. Back here in front of the mic behind the camera for the first time in a little bit, trying to get back into the swing of things. We took a little bit of a break in our recording sessions. So getting back to it here and super excited for today's episode.
Yeah, me too. It definitely feels a little weird, you know. It's like, I guess anything that you take a little bit of a break from, you got to kind of ease your way back into it, dip the toes in. But, excited to be back, definitely ready to go. And obviously this should be a long line of podcasts coming from here on out. I know you guys haven't noticed anything in a break because we've had some pods stocked up for you guys to keep them coming each week. But yeah, it's been a little bit, so hopefully back to it consistently.
Been close to a month, I think, on our recording scale here. Had a vacation to Costa Rica in the interim there, so I'm sure we'll talk about that on one of our Saturday Talks episodes here in the coming weeks, coming months. But yeah, just all in all, getting back into the swing of things this week with work and everything going on. Have family home as well, so it's been a crazy week, and just trying to get back into the swing of things and get stuff done. So.
Yeah, man, it's been nuts here recently. I mean, ever really since we recorded the last time, I feel like business has been booming. Feels like we've officially now hit summer. We're hitting our stride in business and I guess just life in general. Just ramping up the busyness, stuff going on all the time. So just trying to stay out ahead of that. Lot to maintain.
No doubt, no doubt. And it's better in the summertime, though. It's just so much easier to get stuff done, honestly, when you have, 14 hours, 16 hours of sunlight. In the wintertime, when it gets dark at 4 or 5 p.m., it's just hard to keep that motivation going.
Shut it down.
It's just
shut it down.
very easy to do so. So it's a lot easier to do stuff, get stuff done, go from place to place, have a busy day in the summertime, in my opinion.
Yeah, energy levels are higher too. Don't underestimate what some good vitamin D will do for your life. That's the truth. So I feel like most people will say their energy levels are likely higher during the summer months. So definitely a lot less. It feels a lot less taxing, I should say. To kind of keep up with the schedule. But yeah, guys, we're excited to be back at it with you. We had this episode kind of in the works for a little bit. So, this is, I guess, when I was kind of coming up with this or doing a couple of these, I was like, oh, this is kind of a little bit like our myths episode. They kind of fall along in the same kind of line. What's a myth versus, what we're going to talk about today, which is, the worst pieces of advice we've heard about home buying. I even, enlisted a senior advisor of mine who's been in the business a lot longer to throw some ideas out there at me because I wanted to bring you guys, a little bit more experience than I have. Been in the business 6 years, actually going on 7 this year, but figured I'd dip into the 27-year veteran and see if he had any gold for me to share with you guys. So a couple on the list, maybe from him.
Was that Robert or was that Matt?
That's Robert.
Shout out Robert.
Yeah.
Shout out Robert. I'm intrigued to hear which ones he brought to the table here too. So you're gonna have to inform me when we get through them.
Yeah, he was kind of in the same situation I was. Like, oh man, I don't know what is the worst piece of advice I've heard. He's like, oh, gotta bring 20% down. I was like, we already covered that. We could do something different. So safe to say most people, I think, in the mortgage profession, likely that would be their go-to if you had to ask them. Like if you just pulled up somebody on the street, hey, what's your worst piece of advice you've ever had home buyers receive? Oh, you got to put 20% down. So had to make them dig a little bit deeper into the archives for that.
You always feel like you have so many just stacked up in your head, that you've heard over the years. And then when you get to that moment, it's just like, what are all those things that I had stocked up? All those ideas, like, but they're literally all gone now. Like that happens across a lot of different things for me, unfortunately. So
yeah,
I think we had that instance the other day of me just not really knowing what I was saying.
Hey, it happens. I mean, it's crazy to think too. Like sometimes you'll be in the process and be like, my God, that was some horrible advice that you got. You know what I'm saying? And you're like, man, should maybe store that one. But then it's like, then you got to recall these things and it's just not there. So
poof, gone,
just like that. Craziness.
So what's the first piece of advice that you've heard that you would consider to be the worst? What do you got?
Um, looking at this one, looking at kind of the list here we got, I would say, worst pieces of advice, or maybe it's not even advice, maybe it's more so of an expectation that people have, or maybe it's passed down from family members that have, had this. But a lot of times, we deal with clients who believe that they don't need to bring any money to a transaction. At our company, we charge an appraisal. We charge for your appraisal. That's one of our out of pocket fees that our clients pay for, and then obviously everything else is handled at closing. But you would be surprised the amount of pushback that we get from people to just pay the appraisal fee. And it's, we always like to tell people, we're always going to, require our clients to have a little bit of skin in the game here, because if we're ultimately on the hook for these things and you decide to just walk away from the property, that we're out the money, and ultimately it's not our house that we're buying, it's your house that you're buying. So you should definitely have some skin in the game. So I know, oftentimes, I think it's two separate sides of the spectrum. People think they got to have all this money, and then you got other people who think that, hey, I just, they hear zero down and they just think they can just buy loan, get loans for free. They just buy homes and no money out of pocket. And it's like, guys, let's slow our roll here a little bit. Even, and this is one that, Robert talked to me about. He's like, he deals with it a little bit more than we do, but he's just like, we talk to these clients and it's like, dude, like, do you know how much money you would need to go rent right now? Like, you need last month's rent. You're going to need an application fee. You're going to need security deposit. And you don't say a word to the apartment complex at all when you go and rent. That's just their hard, fast rule. And it's just funny how many people like try to combat us on these things. Like, well, why am I paying for my appraisal? Well, why do I have to bring money to closing? But it's like you go rent and it's like no questions are asked. All right, yep, we'll get you our security deposit. We'll get it all. Don't worry, because you want to get in there and live. So it is funny. I think there may be a little bit of a notion that obviously, we have control over the amount of fees or something, and we can just make loans free. So that's one of them that is either advice or expectations that come across the line from certain clients, that we see often.
And I think maybe a part of that too is just education as a whole before they get started. I think it's a well known fact when you go to rent a property that you're going to have those costs up front. And so people know that going into the fact. And then when you go to buy a home, maybe that the word appraisal, you hear that for the very first time ever, and you don't necessarily know exactly what that is, what that entails. And so and that's why they kind of get maybe a little bit hesitant. I just feel like the education aspect of it, as we talk about worst advice, people getting that advice from somebody in the family, a family friend, whatever it may be, just the education aspect of it isn't necessarily all the way there. And so, kind of what we're touching on here as a whole in the episode. So,
Yeah, and I mean, I think obviously you think about it from advertising standpoint as well. Like, it's very easy for somebody who's not in the business, like who is not around real estate, to think that, oh, you said zero down, that must mean that I don't have to bring any money whatsoever. And it's like, that's not necessarily the case. So even though you do have zero down loans, that doesn't mean there's not costs of doing business and those sort of things. So you just are not required to bring a down payment, but that doesn't mean that title companies still aren't going to get paid, your lender's still not going to get paid, all these things that go into making a mortgage whole, are still a part of that, regardless of down payment or not. So that would be one thing that I would just I guess encourage people to change, if that's some advice that you've gotten, go in with the expectation, or at least start to save a little bit of money to play with, for that.
definitely, definitely. So moving on, touching on something that I've heard a lot recently. This is probably the one that I feel most passionate about on our list here because of the kind of climate and market that we've been in over the last few years. And it is marry the house, date the rate. And it when you listen to that statement, like it's just a little bit crazy to think that you're dating something that you sign on a dotted line for 30 years. That's not necessarily dating. That's literally marrying it. I understand the premise of what they're trying to say is that they're going to you want to refinance in a couple of years when rates go lower, which is an very bad piece of advice to me and personally, because you never know where rates are going all in all. So nobody really can predict where rates are going, whether that's next year, 2 years, 5 years. It's very much a variable. It's a variable all in all. And so when you say that, it's kind of not necessarily true. It could be true in 2 years, but it could not be true in 2 years at the same time. And so now you're, you know, marrying this house at this price and dating this rate. And now 2 years later, you try to lower the rate, and now you end up with a higher rate, or you're stuck obviously with your current mortgage when you can't refinance to a lower rate. And so it's just a little bit I, I don't want to use the word predatory, but kind of predatory. It's just like nobody can predict that. We went through a period of time in the springtime where in theory, right, rates drop when the stock market drops as well. Bond yields raise when stocks drop. And so it's we saw stocks drop in a massive kind of massive percentage, maybe 20% in the springtime, and rates did the opposite. And so it's just like you can't ever predict it. And trying to predict it, you're going to be wrong most of the times. It's kind of like all of these people that have doomsday predictions. You know, doomsday has not happened yet, but there have been people throughout history that continue to call for the sky to fall and the world to end. So it's just like you never really know kind of what is in store for the future. And so giving a statement to somebody, a piece of advice to somebody who's listening to you, and you trying to predict the future, in my opinion, is not a very good practice all in all. So
I would like to offer a counterpoint to that. This might be the first time in episode history or in closing the deal history, because I think it's a little bit, I do believe it is a little bit more nuanced, because I've actually used that statement myself. And I'm going to tell you why. So obviously, I think it's more about getting clients to understand that the house is the most important thing, right? If you can afford the payment, because what could happen potentially, and this is where I offer the counterpoint, right? So let's say in your prediction does come true and rates do rise, but you could afford that house payment. You just beat the market. You basically bought a house and now the rates are 9% and you're locked in at 7. And if they go the other way, then you're in a position where you could refinance. And so what I think that message is for a lot of people, is because a lot of people sit on the fence doing what exactly you just said, which is trying to predict the future, which is, oh, in 2 years when rates drop, that's when I'll buy my house. And then in 2 years, look back to 2021, people are like, rates, or 2022, rates were starting to come up a little bit out of that 3%. We're going into the 5 range, and people are like, well, we'll wait. We'll see what happens with everything. We might end up going back down. And it's like, now we're in 2025 and you're at 7%. And the people that sat on the fence saying, I'm not going to touch a house in 2022. I got you guys in 2024. Now that house is 2% higher to own than it was. And what's that house worth in value now versus what was it worth back then? And so I think that's ultimately why that's kind of a thing. And I do understand your thought process, trying to just say, hey, take on this enormous payment because in 2 years it's going to be a lot less than that. That I would agree is very predatory. But if it's from the standpoint of like, when I typically go is when people are kind of like, do we really love this house? Like, we love this house. We really want to own, like, the payments manageable, but we just don't love the rate. It's like, hey, look, dude, at the end of the day, rates could go up another 2% in the next 2 years. And now you've beat the market. You got your house at 7%. You love your house, or rates go down in 2 years, you refinance, you get out of it, and you're in a better position. And so I think it's more so for people like that. Now, if you're just somebody who's like, yeah, I don't really know if I want to buy, I would never like say, hey, like, you need to date the rate, date the rate, marry the house, bro. Like, just get it. But it's like, I feel like a lot of people, it's become very common for people to kind of sit on the fence and sit back on the edge and just say, just do like what you said, try to predict the future of what things are going to do. And it's like, history would tell us that that's not on your side. Getting in now, even if you bought in 2018, 2019, how much has your home appreciated in the last 5 years? Have you not beat that interest rate, even if it has gone up? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you realistically, you have. So it's like, it's just that I see the thought process. I see both sides for sure, but that's just one thing. I would just add that little caveat in there.
yeah, let me just clarify that all in all, what I really mean by predatory is going off of not necessarily that initial payment, that initial rate being manageable. Don't go into the scenario where you're already looking into the future for that payment, for that
Yeah,
rate to be, what you have, and
100%.
maybe just dating that payment. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, no,
that
like,
yeah.
dude, all right, I'm gonna pay 2,000 for 2 years, and then I promise it's gonna get down to 1,800
Yeah,
years after that. So like, then I'll be cool. Like I can handle it now. I get that 100%. Like
for
you
sure.
should never make decisions based on what ifs, but it's like if you really do love the property, because there are people that come to us and they're like, dude, we really love it. I remember having a conversation with this lady because she was literally like, I love this house. Like I really want this house, but this rate is just like, I'm like, hey, like, look, you don't know what rates are going to do. And if you really love the house and you look back 2 years from now and you didn't buy it, it's back on the market and the rates are up. Now you're back in the same position you were, except for the house is worth more. So you have to purchase it for more and your interest rate's higher. So now you're going to pay even more than what you paid. Or on the flip, if it goes down, then you have the chance to refinance, get yourself out of that payment. So I agree. I agree with both. I definitely think there's two ways to definitely look at it, to where it could be, a little on the predatory side. And then also, it could be just to help that person kind of really understand what could potentially happen down the road if not to act now, especially if it's something that you have strong, feelings for.
Absolutely. I love the counterpoint. I love the information. I love it all. Love it.
100%. Well, that takes me into my next one. So this one's not necessarily, I guess, home buying related. It is home buying adjacent, I would say. One thing, and this comes from Robert himself, who this is where I learned all my credit stuff from. So I don't want to call him a credit guru. I don't know if he would necessarily agree with that assessment, but the guy's been around the block a time or two, and definitely has a deep knowledge of credit. And he talks to a lot of clients, and we talk to clients in general who talk about carrying a 30% balance on your credit cards. Like that's just like this magical thing. And so, people that would normally keep zero balances because they hear this, carry these 30% balances on their credit card. They make these minimum payments. Guys, I'm here to tell you 30% does not guarantee you a good credit score. Really, if you were on the hunt for a good credit score, like 0 to 5% is where you're like, if you want to take full advantage, like having a $25,000 credit line and having like a $10 balance or something like that, like that's going to be your sweet spot. Not taking 30% of 25 G's and let it sit on there. That's not going to be the best thing for your credit. So, that's one that you can, I mean, I think credit's one of those really important things. I'm not sure everybody else agrees, but I think it is, because it could make or break whether or not you can buy a house. And so you got to be careful with the advice that you take out there, the things that you follow, because I've also seen 50%. I've seen that 30 to 50% range, and that's just not going to be beneficial for you. Carrying a max balance also is not beneficial for you. That's not, I guess maybe you could see the thought process of like, oh, if I take all this out and I show that I can make my payments on time, that's it's almost like they're testing you to see what you'll do. It's like, here, let me give you this credit line, and here's $5,000. Let's see what he does. You know what I mean? If he goes and takes the whole $4,000 and the whole $5,000 and makes monthly payments on it, cha-ching for us. We'll keep collecting that interest, but we're not going to reward his credit score by any means. We'll just take his money. And then it's like, when you have like this, it's different from a personal loan. A personal loan has a set payment. You're going to make that every month. A credit card's like, dude, I could go buy this and this and this and make $25 a month payment. Oh, hold up. You got my attention. It's like, that's exactly what they want. And so the lower you keep your balance on your credit cards, the better off your credit score is going to be. So just want to nip that in the butt right there. If that's something you've heard, probably send that person to this podcast or to the other credit podcast and let them know they got it wrong. That's what I would do.
I'm convinced that any article, any piece of information that's ever been published that said they need a 30% balance, 50% balance, that's written by the credit card company. No doubt
Yeah,
about it.
100%.
No
Like,
doubt about it.
we'll definitely keep them. We'll definitely, I mean, you guys are doing them a huge service. I
Making
mean, you're
them
not
so
doing your
much
credit
money.
score a service, but you're making them money, because it'll take you years to pay that off, making the minimum payment, and they'll keep collecting that interest and say no words about it. So,
Have you ever looked at, a larger credit card balance, like the statement, and what it shows you, like if you made the minimum payment only and how long it would take, like how
yeah, it's,
crazy,
I'm pretty
outrageous
sure
it is?
it's like the length of a mortgage term.
Yeah.
It's like
Yep.
25, 30 years or something
Hmm.
like that, dude.
Yeah.
It's
And
ridiculous. And the
you
amount
pay
of
like
interest paid over
literally
that comparative to what you borrowed would be just absolutely insane.
500% or more. It's
Yeah,
foul.
it's It's sick work. So, credit cards great, like very, very good, especially if you know how to use them. If you can use them for travel points, those sort of things. Like if you can work the system, they're a great tool. I'm not on that Dave Ramsey method. If you are, you do you. I don't think it's bad for people that like cannot simply have those sort of things. Like you've got to do
Self-control.
cash. Yeah, like
Yeah.
absolutely. But if you can work a credit card, you're going to notice those benefits for sure.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So moving on to my next one, I'm going to talk about something that we maybe a little bit touched on a little bit already in our myths episode, and it is that you don't need an inspection. This is always terrible advice, in my opinion. All in all, no matter what the scenario, what the market dictates, no matter what, you should always absolutely have an inspection done on a potential property that you're looking to buy or that you're in contract on. Again, at the very, very most, with all of the bells and whistles on your inspection, you're going to spend $1,000, and you can spend $1,000 tripping over your house and repairing your floor when you move into it. So again, having a baseline for when you move in, a preparation, a plan for all of the things that may need fixed before you buy the property is crucial, in my opinion. Again, spending $1,000 to find a $20,000 foundation issue that's going to cause more issues on top of that is well worth the $1,000 that you spend up front. And even if you don't have anything pop up on that inspection report, again, it's just for your peace of mind. So again, the fact that people are saying, you don't need an inspection, you can get away without it. You absolutely can, but the trade off, the downside to it is way bigger than I think you saving that $1,000, $500, whatever it may be. So always, always recommend to have the inspection done and have all of your bases covered before you go make probably the largest financial purchase of your entire life. So
I agree, man. I actually just had a conversation with a client about that today because they were on opposite sides of the spectrum. One of them said, yes, we're going to get one. The other was like, I thought we might skip that. And I'm like, for me personally, like I'm not on that side of things. I don't see houses every day. I don't walk through them every day. Like that's not what I do. But again, it's just like, if you had the opportunity, like if you were going to go buy a car, and you had the opportunity to get an inspection done on it to make sure the car is running right, make sure the brakes were updated, or not even updated, how much life's left on the brakes, how much life's left on the tire tread, how much, life is left on these things that go in the, I'm not a car guy, but I'm just saying like how much life is left on these. And I try to tell people it's almost like a roadmap to buying your home, right? It's almost an understanding of, okay, what am I going to be looking at over the next 3, 5, 7 years that are going to need to be taken care of on this so you can start to prepare. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not really a fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy when it comes to my finances. I like to be prepared for things coming down the road. I really would not like to have a $10,000 roof bill dropped on my lap and just say, hey, here you go, bro, figure it out. Like I would like to be like, okay, if I know that's going to come in the next 2 years, perfect. Here's the savings plan. Here's how we start working this to make sure that this is taken care of when that time comes. Like for me, that's like, it's just like a no brainer. So anybody who's thinking about skipping an inspection to save $400, it's like, I don't know.
it's kind
My
of like
uncle has a
insurance.
saving, but has a saying, but I don't, let me see if it'll come to me.
It's kind of like insurance as a whole, right? Are you not you're going to insure your car before you leave and drive out on the road just in case of anything that's happening, Again, you should always have a backup plan, an insurance plan to have an answer if something does arise. And so when you don't have that inspection report, you may have something arise and then you push it down the drain for a little bit and now something bigger is arose. And so it can all just be simply fixed and taken care of by just doing a little bit of prep work beforehand. The you know all in all, it's just prep,
I
just
mean, dude, and
prep.
it comes back to the whole thing we touched on first, just the money thing. Like, dude, like, why are you expecting to go into a house with no money? Like, we can't be squandering over 400 or 500 bucks when you could potentially be on the hook for thousands, like months after closing, like months. Like, it could be that fast. Something could go wrong that quickly if
Mm-hmm.
you skip that, and it could have been. either resolved, like the inspector could have found it, you could have negotiated that into your, for the seller to take care of before you purchase the home, or at least let a know, if that's not the route you want to go, at least know it's going to come across the desk. You know what I mean? It's just like, I it's obviously, I know the world's gotten more expensive and things have happened in the last several years, but like there's just certain things that you should not compromise on, in my opinion. And that's what my uncle says: buy quality, cry once. And it's so true, because like I used to, like, even for him, like I would take my car to him and I'd be like, yeah, just get the aftermarket brakes, just get whatever's, throw anything on there, whatever's the cheapest. And then when you got to go do it again 20,000 miles later, when you could have just got new, the better brakes, and we're talking 3, 4, 5 years, it's just like, okay, so do that math stretched out. Does it really make sense? We oftentimes get so caught up in saving this initial money, when really you're saving yourself over the long term. So, not that I'm a financial guy by any means, but I would say, think about that before you make those decisions. Um, yeah, I mean, God, we're so many ways we could go from here. We could just keep going on the money side of things, I guess. So this was one I put on here, and I think probably best coming from me, because I think, obviously, if you're skipping this, then you're not having this conversation with this person. So, skip the real estate agent to save yourself money. This is something I actually just had a conversation with a client last week. Asked me, am I required to have a real estate agent? I said, you're most certainly not. You can go, put yourself into a contract on your own. I said, do you understand everything that goes into a contract? Do you know all the ins and outs? And I was like, because if you don't, you're probably more comfortable doing that with a real estate agent. And so, that's a question that we get asked often, a lot of times, because of the cost, because of the, commission points and that sort of thing. People do tend to, wonder about, hey, I just want to go get it for sale by owner. Hey, I just want to go, do this myself. Hey, and it's like, okay, that's all great. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying, from my personal perspective, they're professionals for a reason. Is every real estate agent out there worth the money that you may spend on them? Absolutely not. I wouldn't say that either. But is every professional in every line of work always worth the money that you spend? No, that's just not reality. There's going to be people that perform below standards. So that's why you should do your due diligence in the beginning, and pick a real estate agent that, makes sense for you, and you believe is actually going to take your best interest at heart, and, go above and beyond for you. Um, but to think that you could just go and engage in a real estate transaction with no prior knowledge of that, to save yourself some money, when in all reality, most likely, I mean, what we are still seeing, even though since the rules changes, that the seller is still covering buyer's agent fees, just seems a little bit foolish to me, when you could have a professional walk you through that. So, my personal opinion, that's some bad advice that I've heard, but, to each his own. If that's something you want to do, by all means, go ahead and do that. But that's my thoughts. I mean, I don't know, again, what thoughts you have. Like I said, nobody's calling you saying, hey, do I need a real estate agent? All right, I'm not going to use you. Thanks. So, but they do ask us that, relatively often. We get that question, and, that's usually my answer.
Yeah, I mean, all in all, in really all aspects of life, it's really about opportunity cost and what is that going to cost you, time wise, money wise, et cetera, et cetera. Think about any do DIY job in the history of home ownership. I can do anything. It's just a it's just a matter of how long it's going to take me, how much stress it's going to cause me, how much money it's going to cost me to do it myself. At that point, you got to weigh your options. Do I hire a professional at this rate? Or do I try it myself at this rate, time, money, stress, whatever it may be? And so I guess that's the conversation that you got to have with yourself when you decide this, or when you hear this piece of advice too. It's just, can I navigate a legal document and contract? Do I feel comfortable doing that? Do I have the time to do it? And, want to put the time and stress into it. And so it's just, that opportunity cost. It's always there with every decision that we make in life, all in all. And so that's just something that you got to weigh personally and decide. All in all, I've realized personally, just professionally and DIY jobs, like my time is valuable, all in all. So it may be more worth me, paying somebody 45, $50 an hour to come do this maintenance rather than me try to do it for, 4 hours, 5 hours and be frustrated throughout all of it. So it's just, it can be, just opportunity cost. Depends on you, the person, and what your situation is, your experiences, all of the above. So
Yeah, I mean, we've had people do it. We do have people do it. Like, it's something that's definitely possible for you. I guess that's just I mean, let's be real. This is obviously a very opinionated podcast that we're doing right now, just based on our personal, experiences in life. And maybe you've done it. Maybe you're listening to this and you've done it yourself. And you guys are making this a way bigger deal than it needs to be. Like it's, but that's not everybody's experience. Not everybody is, again, like Zach said, do you have the time? Like, I work in the loan business, but I don't know that I would, want to go out and do all of that myself. Not to mention, I don't have access to some of the tools that real estate agents have access to. You're always getting late data based on the fact that if you're operating on a Zillow, if you're operating on a realtor.com versus somebody who's operating on an MLS, like you're always going to be behind the eight ball a little bit there. And so it's like you're paying for tools, you're paying for, other things that are beneficial. And so, and again, not to mention, like I said, we're still seeing most of the time sellers are covering buyer's agent costs. So, I mean, is it really a cost to you? Not really. Not for the most part if you negotiate the contract right. So it's like, what are we doing here? That's just my shameless plug of my friend here.
couldn't agree more, though. I mean, honestly, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Where are you taking us next?
We are staying on the money, all in all. When we're talking about home sellers and home buyers, I've heard so many times that price means everything when talking about a home purchase, all in all, between the buyer and the seller, which couldn't be farther from the truth, all in all, in my opinion, is because you obviously price does matter. What the seller is going to net out and what the buyer is actually paying out of pocket does matter incredibly, absolutely. But it's not the only thing that matters, and it does not mean everything, all in all. There's going to be scenarios where the seller needs to move in 2 weeks, and so at that point they will take a lower price to be able to move in 2 weeks. The buyer that's able to move in 2 weeks or close in 2 weeks is going to be the buyer that gets the offer accepted. And so it really just depends on different scenarios, all in all. Obviously price is going to be the number one thing usually that home sellers look at and home buyers look at, but there are a lot of different terms that can make or break, a contract, can make or break acceptance of a contract. And it just depends on different situations, all in all. Some home sellers are not going to take any repairs. They're not going to do any repairs at all. And so when you put in there that you're going to do an inspection of 10 days, a 10-day window of inspections, and then, 5-day window of request to remedy, the seller is probably not looking at your offer no matter what you offered price wise. And so it's just different situations. And that is kind of going back to our last worst advice. Another part of the real estate agent's job is to kind of find those pain points and find what the seller is looking for, or what the buyer is looking for as well. And so, just all in all, price does not mean everything. It means a lot for sure, and obviously, it's going to be usually the first thing that somebody is looking at when looking at a contract. But so many other terms that can be negotiated and changed and varied throughout the entire home buying process. And so, I would say price does not mean everything. It means something, but not everything.
So yeah, just kind of talking about just going in and offering, just over asking and expecting that to be kind of the end all be all, that they're just going to automatically take your offer just because you're over asking price, which again is foolish. If you're not looking for the right things, maybe that works for some sellers if that's all they genuinely care about. They don't care about any of the other terms, but more often than not, there's other ways to strategically, put your offer together to help hit those pain points, like Zach said.
Absolutely. You just got to find out what they are, honestly. Once you find out what they are, it's pretty simple from there. But all in all, just again, make sure that you're paying attention to everything past price. There's just so many other terms that can be done in the contract. So
Love it. Well, that kind of brings me to my last one, just to kind of wrap here. we've already talked a lot about this, but why not go for some more. So talking about not saving for a down payment and just using down payment assistance or zero down loans. So I don't want to say that that thought process is necessarily wrong. I don't want to say that you should automatically become the person, to do the 10% or the 20% down. But I do believe that there is a thought process that goes along with these, low down payment or down payment assistance or zero down loans, that the expectation of the client when they come in is that there's going to be nothing that they're going to have to bring nothing to the table. Love it, guys. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for this episode. We've talked about a lot of different pieces of advice that we heard, but I think now it's your guys' turn to let us know any pieces of advice that you've heard that either you want us to review, want us to kind of give you some feedback on if that's bad advice or good advice, or just in general any advice that you've heard. We're always down to hear from you guys on anything that you find beneficial or have any questions about. So, Zach, any parting words for everybody as we
No,
jump
I
out of
don't
here?
think so. I'm sure the listeners do have some of those, the worst advice that were in our head back there that we couldn't forget or we couldn't remember about.
Yeah,
So, yeah, definitely let us know in the comments what you've heard. Um, whether that was, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or even a year ago, 6 months, relatively soon. And it all applies for sure. So, definitely want to hear your guys' opinions, maybe even opinions about what we've talked about, all of the our worst advice that we've heard. So
yeah. I mean, I would love to hear if you guys think our worst advice is terrible advice, or our advice is terrible advice. Go
absolutely,
ahead, let us know. We're open for conversation here, as you guys could tell by the beginning of the pod there. So, just love to hear feedback in general from you
absolutely,
guys.
couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Well, guys, if you haven't already, go check out our latest Saturday, or I guess not our latest, our newest
Series,
podcast. I guess what
series,
what would you
yeah.
call it? Series, or yeah, just kind of format. We are going to be starting or I guess we already started again. We're going to be doing a Saturday talk series. Going to be a little bit different than this, a little bit less real estate, maybe some in there just kind of about what's going on in our lives, but also just, giving you guys a little bit of insight into who we are as people outside of what we do, for work and for a living. So, how we always, do a little chat at the beginning of our episodes. That's going to be, long form of that essentially. So, the first one was good. There's some gold on there. You guys can find out all about ZD and how good he is at planning. So if you guys haven't already, go back, give it a listen. We had a lot of fun recording it. I will just say it is not safe for work, so a little bit different than our current, content. There are some curse words and things of that nature on there. So I guess just be prepared for that. But had a lot of fun, and I think it's going to be a pretty cool series. All in all, I don't know, if we're going to be looking for every 2 weeks, every month or something like that, just to get those out, just give you guys kind of updates on our lives and share kind of the fun, cool stuff that we find ourselves into from time to time.
Absolutely, because even for us, the real estate stuff and professional stuff can get a little bit mundane. Obviously, we got a lot of other
Yeah.
things going on in life and whatnot, and obviously want our listeners to see that side of ourselves as well. So yeah, super excited about that series. The first episode was a gem for sure. Can confirm. And so definitely go check that out if you haven't already. So second one will be coming soon, based on this podcast drop, I think so.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, guys, again, please, if you would share these podcasts, share this information with any friends or family that you guys feel would get, some value or some benefit out of it. And find us on all socials: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, not on TikTok for a lot of you guys out there, but those are kind of, and then obviously the podcasts are available, on most places, Spotify, Apple, those sort of things. So really appreciate you guys tuning in and checking us out, and we're excited to continue. I mean, at the time we're recording this, we got about a half year left, so it's been crazy that we've already been doing this long. This just all started as an idea, I guess, last year, and so to see it come to fruition has been pretty freaking cool, if you ask me. So excited about finishing out the year strong and bringing some more good content for you guys.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more with the statement that it feels a little bit surreal. You know, it is crazy that it was just an idea, and now we're 26 episodes deep, or whatever it may be at this point, and so many more to go. So,
Yeah,
super excited, and hopefully, you guys found some value and enjoyed the episode today. So,
absolutely, guys. All right, well, we'll catch up with you guys on the next one, and have a great rest of your day. See ya.